note I'd like to say is that for the taping here tonight, I've been asked that there's no sidebar conversations going on because it will interfere with the taping of the event. So if you can hold that down to a little bit of a roar, we'd appreciate it. First of all, I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome everyone here tonight and at home. Hopefully it'll be viewed as the first televised 2015 mayoral debate. This is democracy in action, folks. Exercising our First Amendment rights of free speech. Also, if you're not registered to vote, there's instruction on the back table in a sheet with all the information you need to get registered. It's your right, it's your duty to vote. Please, if you're not registered, get it done in the back. Before we start the actual debate, I would like to take a minute to thank the two mayoral candidates for attending tonight's debate. Please give a warm welcome to District 2 Councilman Bob Odenkirk and Joliet Junior College Board Chairman Andy Hollage. Please. We did in fact have one candidate that expressed their concerns and reservation about attending tonight's debate. The organizers and candidate Bob Odenkirk did in fact try to address those concerns by offering that individual the opportunity to change the venue and bring their own moderator. He chose not to accept the offer. They want to ask so they can be informed and make intelligent decisions when they vote. With that being said, I would like to thank Pastor David Turner from Soul Purpose Church for stepping in to moderate tonight's debate on short notice. We gratefully appreciate your helping us out tonight. Thank you, sir. Tonight's debate is hosted by St. John's Neighborhood Association, Cunningham Neighborhood Council, and we'd also like to thank the hardworking people who pulled this together and the volunteers from Community Alliance and Action Network and the Will County Center for Independent Living. Please give them a round of applause. And a big thank you to our crusader of justice for free speech, Julia Alexander, for stepping up to record tonight's debate. We thank you for that. And last, I'd like to ask all elected officials and candidates to please rise and identify yourself, wave a hand so people can see you.
Thank you. First of all, it's my honor and privilege to be able to participate as much as I will in this process this evening. Before we start, I want to lay out the ground rules for tonight's debate. First and foremost, all candidates must be treated with the utmost respect. To begin the debate, each candidate will be given 3 minutes to introduce themselves and tell us why they are running for mayor of Joliet. At the close of the debate, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to make closing remarks. To be fair, at the beginning of the debate, the candidates will pick cards to see who goes first or second. They will be allowed 1 minute to answer the question that they are asked, and then the other candidate will be allowed 30 seconds to rebuttal if they would like to make a comment. We will have a person keeping time tonight, and the candidates will receive a 30-second warning, which is the yellow sign, and a red sign to ask them to stop talking. The candidates will be allowed to ask 2 questions of each other and allowed 1 minute to respond. 1 question may be asked before intermission, and a remaining question before their closing remarks. It has been noted that the Evergreen Terrace is such a complex topic that each candidate will be given 5 minutes to tell their position. And we'll start that. That'll be the first question, if you will. Tonight's questions were randomly selected from the questions posted on the mayoral debate page located on Facebook. And then there are other questions that came from residents at tonight's debate. When guests arrived, we were given the opportunity to fill out a card to enter a question. And we'll read as many as we can with the time allotted. I'll try to group them by subject matter, but that may not be exactly possible. All questions are screened for appropriateness and will not be allowing questions that are personal attacks on any of the candidates. Right now, you can pass those to the end of your aisle and we'll gather those questions. Okay, we'll see you. Who gets to go first? All right, before we start, too, I just want to make sure I address each of the candidates properly. If you want to go by title, councilman, chairman, or first name, last name, just how you gentlemen go by. Bob. All right, thank you. All right, first question is for Andy. Oh, I'm sorry, my mistake. Thank you. Thank you. Opening remarks.
Good evening. I'm Andy Mihelich, candidate for mayor of Joliet.
Good evening.
I'm Andy Mihelich, candidate for mayor of Joliet. I'm excited to be here tonight. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for attending. Joliet is a great place to live, work, and raise a family. Together we can make it better. Hopefully, tonight you will see some of the similarities and differences in the positions and visions for Joliet. I will start by asking city staff to clarify the city ordinance that was supposedly going to ban the use of JCTV equipment to prevent voters from learning more about the candidate for mayor and the city council. I developed 101 ideas for a new Joliet, and I emphasize new. The events that surround this debate are practices of the past that have no place in my vision for a new Joliet. My primary goals for Joliet are good jobs and improved public safety. I also support the freezing of property and sales tax rates. We need to stop the practice of developing our expense budget first, then increase our tax rates in the revenue budget to create a balanced overall budget. This is also a practice of the past that needs to be left in the past. Everyone should know that balancing next year's budget without using up reserve funds is going to be very difficult. This year, the City Council voted to utilize over $8 million in reserve funds to balance the 2015 budget. As mayor, I will have the City Council prioritize its top projects and request that the city administration develops a proposed budget with these items included and other items eliminated. My 4 top priorities for new money are: 1, Evergreen Terrace acquisition; 2, more neighborhood community police officers; 3, acquiring the needed resources to get all of our streets plowed of snow in 48 hours; and 4, monies for contractual grant writers paid on a % of grant rewards received. I also support the sale of Silver Cross Field or conversion of the stadium to a multi-use 2-sport facility. If we elect not to sell Silver Cross Field, the city needs to include recovering some or all of the cost of the new $360,000 plus scoreboard in the next contract with the ballpark operator. We need to change the route of museums' non-accountable subsidies to accountable incentive plans. We also need to take actions to find alternate funding to get them off the city payroll.
Okay, Andy. Nope. That was 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you to the organizers for coming out and letting us happen. And thank you to everyone who cares about your community and coming out here and seeing and supporting this debate. I'm just going to give an introduction about myself. There's plenty of time to talk about positions. My name is Bob Loderkirk. I'm the District 2 City Councilman. I was elected to the City Council in 2011. This is the heart of District 2 right here. I first came to Joliet in 1993. I was hired as a police officer. I spent 10 years in the Joliet Police Department. I was a highly commendated police officer. I received 4 Officer of the Year nominations. In 1995, I won the Martin Muir Labor Award with my partner, Pat Cardinal. I was also elected member of the Fraternal Order of Police. I was on the executive board for 2 years. After 6 years in the police department, I made the decision to go back to school. I attended the John Marshall Law School at night while working a full-time job. I earned a law degree in 4 years. I wrote law review. I graduated with honors. I was on the dean's list every semester. In 2003, I left the city of Joliet and I became an attorney for the city of Chicago. I worked in Chicago for 3 years. In 2006, I came back to Joliet in private practice. In 2008, I was recruited to go to Iraq and work with our State Department. I was embedded with the United States Army and I worked in conjunction with the Iraqi military and Iraqi police. In Iraq, when the country, I was promoted to regional commander. I had 270 people under my command, and I worked the 2 northern provinces of Iraq, the Tikrit and the Mosul regions, which I'm proud to say are on the front lines of the fight against ISIS right now. The Iraqis who are leading the charge against ISIS were the very people who partnered up with coalition forces when we were there and stepped up for their country. In 2010, I returned to Joliet, went back into business as a lawyer. I currently own a downtown law practice. I have 8 employees that work for me. Joined the council in 2011, and essentially the reason why I joined is I came back to Joliet in 2010 after years of financial boom with 2 riverboats pouring money into the city. We were told in 2010 that the city was facing a $27 billion deficit. And I couldn't understand, as many Joliet residents, how we could have gone from the boom years to being in such bad financial shape. While running for the council, I promised not to support any tax increases, and I kept my word. I promised to be a fresh voice on the council. I've kept my word. Myself and some of the other newer council people have stood up against the old boys and business as usual and done what we believe to be right. I also helped spearhead with Councilman Hung a push for an economic development committee. After Councilman McFarland's election, the votes existed on the council to get that done. For the first time, the city has an economic development committee. For the first time, the city has an oversight committee for the housing authority. And for the first time, the city has a diversity committee. I'm proud to say I was part of all those votes, all of which Mayor Girani opposed. But there's plenty of time for the other issues tonight. But again, thank you for coming out, and I'm really looking forward to this debate. Thank you.
Okay, before the first question, if you will, the first topic is Evergreen Terrace. And you'll be given 5 minutes to state your position on that. So, Andy?
Thank you. Evergreen Terrace. The acquisition cost is expected to be between $14 and $24 million. Although this amount is a lot of money, citizens making their own judgments on what the city should do need to recall the living and unsafe conditions that were at the time the city first initiated the lawsuit to take legal possession of the property. We can argue whether or not the city took the best course of action in pursuit of possession, especially in light of the millions of unanticipated dollars already spent above the millions of dollars planned to be spent. This was in the past. Now we need to decide how the city will move forward. Considering the track record of the current owners with regard to living conditions and safety, given the devastation of entire neighborhoods around the complex and cost to the city should not expect that the owners will maintain the complex. If the city does not take legal possession, conditions will revert to being neglected and unsafe. The strategy to accomplish possession is for the city to handle the cost of acquisition and site improvements through the issuance of bonds. The city would then repay the bonds through the federal rent payments. The management company recently hired by the city needs to confirm the city's projections. From the initial indications, this funding option appears to be viable. The management company also needs to analyze the total complex from both the people and building perspective and make appropriate recommendations with options to the city council. The city then needs to keep the general and public informed while soliciting input from residents and other concerned stakeholders. The next step in the process is to ascertain if public-private partnerships that includes multi-income housing with less density is an option. This is my preferred course of action for the buildings to be renovated. From here, by court order, the city needs to provide every resident being displaced with 2 Section 8 housing choices. Some question whether or not the city has this many Section 8 units available. To ensure we can secure the sufficient number of Section 8 housing units in neighborhoods we want and do not want to target, I am proposing an outside, independent person be added to the process of determining which housing unit gets certified as Section 8 housing. This outside independent person will ensure that housing units in areas we want to target are not rejected for a minor violation, and that housing units are not approved where there is already a high concentration of Section 8 housing. Next, we need to ensure that Evergreen Terrace residents are treated with compassion. The city should contract with an individual or business to help residents find other housing. Counseling and training should be provided to residents on making the transition from multifamily living to single-family housing. Residents need to understand their responsibilities as renters under single-family Section 8 housing requirements. Finally, we need to identify which unit of government will have responsibility for oversight and management of the new Evergreen Terrace. The city unit will be charged with continually monitoring revenue and expenses to ensure that no big black hole does not continue in the city budget. Let's expect challenges and plan accordingly. Let's make the acquisition of Evergreen Terrace as painless as possible for its residents. And most importantly, let's make the new Evergreen Terrace something we are proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, this is a good topic, and I'm glad we've given 5 minutes to talk about it because there's been more misinformation about the Evergreen Terrace project than any other single issue that I've dealt with on the City Council. So if I can quickly, I'll try to start from the beginning. In 2005, when the city initiated this lawsuit, the purpose was to tear Evergreen Terrace down, and if you don't have to read it, but if you listen to the unfortunate comments made by Councilman Brophy, it was to run the people of Evergreen Terrace out of Joliet. I'm not going to use the language he used, but it was clear what the city's intent was. In 2011, largely because of those comments, the United States government sued Joliet. Eric Holder, the United States attorney, the top law enforcement official in the country, and Patrick Fitzgerald, the Chicago U.S. attorney, filed suit against Joliet, trying to stop the tear down of Evergreen Terrace and alleged that we were doing it for racial discriminatory reasons. The city fought the lawsuit and eventually settled with the federal government. Because of the settlement, there are conditions that were put on the city of Joliet that were never considered back in 2005, and I don't think have ever been explained to the residents. Again, I talk about misinformation. First of all, if we do choose to tear down the buildings, we have to keep approximately 130 Section 8 units in Joliet. We have to provide the housing for a minimum of 20 years. It's never been determined by city staff where that housing is going to be, what it's going to cost. If we're building new housing, if we're using existing housing, there is no plan in place to determine what this is going to be. Second condition put by the federal government. On the Evergreen Terrace property, we have to build another park, which is a nice idea, but it will cut into any redevelopment that's going to take place in that area, and it's going to tie our hands to get private money to come in. The cost of return is going to be diminished by that park. You can't build condos or new homes where a park is. Third, we are required by the federal government to build a community center and operate it for a minimum of 20 years. Again, city staff has never identified how we're going to build this center, who's going to maintain it, who's going to be responsible. Meanwhile, the lawsuit continues. To date, we have spent over $7 million in legal fees in Evergreen Terrace. That $7 million did not go to a local law firm. Remember, this is to condemn a building. The $7 million went to Chicago law firm. There's no end to the site in the legal expenses as an appeal is likely. The biggest problem that I've had with Evergreen Terrace, and nobody needs to explain to me the conditions of the building. Quite frankly, I've spent more time in those buildings than everyone else in the council put together. I was a policeman. I've arrested people in there. I've chased people through the buildings. I've fought people in the stairwells. I had a gun pulled on me and stuck in my face in the stairwells. I understand the deplorable conditions at Evergreen Terrace. The problem is that the city has blindly gotten into this lawsuit and have dug a hole the size of a crater. We don't know what the cost of acquisition is going to be. I think Mr. Mahalich is right. It's going to be somewhere around $15 million. We don't know right now, 10 years into the suit, $7 million sunk into it, whether or not there are asbestos in the buildings. We have no idea what it's going to cost to tear it down if we choose to do that. If there are asbestos, the cost to tear it down could be somewhere between $10 and $15 million more. We don't know what it's going to cost to redevelop the land. We don't know where we're going to put the people or what the cost to do that is. I think it's unconscionable that our city leaders have put us to this point without any real plan. And I will reference comments made by our mayor at Sunday's Herald News, where he said flippantly, why would we spend money to develop a plan if we don't know we're going to buy the buildings? Why would challenge the mayor, why would anyone spend $7 million if you don't even know what the final plan is? I can tell you on the table, there's been various different options. One of them, which no one wants to discuss publicly, is that there are city officials that are saying that once we buy Evergreen Terrace, we're not going to tear it down, we're going to continue to operate it and collect the rent money and use that money over the next 10, 15, 20 years to pay for the cost of acquisition and the cost for tear down. To me, that's unacceptable. Joliet government has no business owning public housing. And it defeats the very purpose why we got into this in the first place. I'll make one final point. I was an attorney for the city of Chicago in the 2000s when the public housing projects in Chicago came down. The city of Chicago never tried to buy those projects and redevelop them. Chicago Housing Authority worked in conjunction with HUD to get it done. Joliet has taken the wrong path. Very quickly, because my time is coming up, the only viable option I see is for Joliet to form with community groups, non-for-profit community groups, to try to mimic what was done at a smaller scale in Chicago. There is federal funding available for these non-for-profit community-based groups that can help pull us out of the Evergreen Terrace mess. Thank you.
Okay, the next question. What are some of the plans you have for a more transparent city government? And
Thank you. It's my turn. Thank you. I think a couple things can be done. I think our city government the transparency has improved since I've been on the council. I can tell you currently our CTIS committee is developing programming that would allow access on the city website to neighborhood groups and neighborhood meetings. I think the neighborhood groups in our city are really crucial. And I think it's something that maybe we should promote more on the council level. Again, I can tell you that we push for this. It's got to be done. It's going to be available on the city website. But I think as mayor or from the city council point of view, we should advertise the group meetings more often and encourage people to join those groups.
I think that the city of Joliet itself has done a very good job at being transparent. Individual council members as well as the mayor is where the true transparency happens. You need to have an open, honest relationship with the constituency of Joliet. Communicate those views, the city from your heart, and reflect that so that everybody understands the issues and the problems that the city is facing.
thank you. All right, next question, Andy. How would you change or not the Rialto board selection?
Well, first of all, that I believe that a process should be put in place for appointments to all boards and commissions made by the mayor, so that we identify the role, the mission, and the responsibilities of each position appointee, communicate those to the public at large, solicit appointments, interview candidates based upon their qualifications and the role requested of each position, and then select the person that is the most dynamic in accomplishing a new vision for that position. We should not roll over the appointments until a new person is there. The end date, we should stop, reevaluate. If the person wants to reapply, let them reapply. But we need new voices on all of our committees and boards throughout the city.
I think the current process works, and I thought you saw it work at a recent council meeting. The mayor makes the appointment, but the mayor doesn't have the final authority. The authority rests with the city council, who can either deny or approve the appointment. I think for too long, these appointments were political. You can look at any committee in the city, and I think you're going to see that for yourself. But ultimately, it rests with the city council to stand up and do the right thing. I think it was done several weeks ago when the council voted no on a recent appointment. It had nothing to do with the individual being appointed. It had to do with the process and the time of the election. I think the process works best when the council does its job.
All right, next question for Bob. Joliet residents, like most residents in the United States, currently have one or two choices in internet broadband providers. Now that the FCC has cleared the legal hurdles for community broadband, I would like to know which candidates would pursue establishing community broadband and/or leverage these recent regulatory changes to promote competition and cheaper access for Joliet residents.
Again, if I understand the question, community broadband would be internet access or broadband outside of your cable company. Currently, we're working downtown. We are establishing Wi-Fi throughout downtown. I think it's needed, especially if we're going to redevelop downtown, bring it into the 21st century. I think it would be outstanding if we could do that citywide. I think any time you can have choices for consumers in the marketplace, buy your cable through your cable company or internet service through your cable company or through city broadband, I think is great. I think it would be a time-consuming process to do that. It'd probably take time to do it in a city the size of Joliet. But again, I think we're already doing that downtown. I think it's something you will see expanded throughout the city as we go forward.
I post one of my ideas every day. My idea for that will be posted this Sunday will be that the city of Joliet needs to get rid of its stigma of being a warehouse community and investigate the possibilities that high-speed internet access provides, such as Google Fiber and the activities that have taken place in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where they funded that through entire grant sources from the federal government to set this system up. It was created as a job development activity, but the offshoot is that it provides residents with cheaper access.
Thank you. All right, next question for Angie. What is your plan for the homeless population in our community?
Well, I have a number of ideas on the homeless. The first is that we create a task force. The second one is that we accept the challenge, to accept Michelle Obama's challenge to end homelessness for veterans. We need to accept that challenge, address the issues and end homelessness for veterans. Also, as part of my idea on panhandlers and enforcing city ordinances, I'd also like to create a funding system to collect monies so that they would go to community-based organizations that serve the homeless, to take them off the street and then provide them with restaurant cards so that they can purchase and buy food. So it's a very serious issue. We have not addressed this area as being serious, and we need to put actions in place to address that, and I plan to do so.
Thank you. I don't think it's a secret Joliet has a large homeless population. It's a transient population. As a police officer, I have a lot of contact with homeless people. I can tell you, after speaking to them, that Joliet is considered a mecca with homeless people. And homeless advocates or homeless publications will advertise for Joliet because of all the social services we offer. I think it's great that we do that as a Catholic. I believe that we should care for our brother. On the flip side, I think there's a financial component that has to be considered when you're trying to redevelop an area like the downtown area. I think you need to consider the implications that homeless can have. However, I do think we have numerous homeless centers and homeless advocacy groups in Joliet that take care of those people.
Okay, next question for Bob. Will the first projects on the Hill be condemned? This is a breeding ground for constant violence we face in this area. Our children cannot play safely outside without parents worrying about gunfire. Getting rid of those projects will be the greatest start in making this area better for residents and children.
I'm very familiar with the area. This is on the Hill, the first projects of the Fairmont Avenue housing projects. For most of my 10 years as a policeman, I worked in that neighborhood. I can tell you currently the problem, and there's been always been problems there, but because of the tear down of Chicago public housing, There's a large number of residents in that neighborhood that are from Chicago, and you have strife in the neighborhood between local Joliet people and Chicago people that come in. Housing Authority tore down the McKay Street project several years ago. The project worked. You see new buildings up there now, new houses. The neighborhood is much better. I think the Joliet Housing Authority should strive to do the same with Fairmont. I believe they are working in that direction, and I think it's something that the city should encourage them to do. It would improve blight and improve that neighborhood substantially.
What is the silver lining in the Evergreen Terrace process? The silver lining is that it's going to allow us to take a relook at the Housing Authority of Joliet, to create a bold new vision for the Housing Authority of Joliet that will provide a master and a strategic plan for all of its developmental units. These units that are recognized in the question would be identified as to whether or not these are the type of unit we want to keep, change, or do something different with. So we need to act in response to this new vision for the Housing Authority of Joliet.
Thank you. Okay, next question. For Andy, what do you think is the most pressing issue facing Joliet right now?
Well, the number one issue is definitely jobs. People need to be working, have good paying jobs with benefits. As part of my responsibilities at Joliet Junior College, I was responsible for economic development. I can be the top salesperson in economic development in creating new jobs for the city. So jobs is definitely the number one issue. I have the experience and background to address these issues, and we need to look at the programs such as surveying our entire community, commissioning a study to identify which people need jobs, skill backgrounds, and going after the types of industries that we need for good paying jobs and not just the warehouse jobs that are coming to Joliet.
I think Mr. Mihalich is close. I think jobs are 1A. I think the number one pressing issue, and I think everyone in this room knows this for what's going on the last week, is you need to elect city officials that are going to be honest to you and tell you the truth. The political shenanigans at City Hall need to stop. The lying to people, lying to council members needs to stop. You need honest people in city government, and it starts in the mayor's office.
Next question for Bob. What will you do about cleaning the streets of Joliet?
I get a clue. There were cutbacks all over the city after the 2008 recession. Our Public Works Department took significant cutbacks. Some of us on the council have called attention to this and have argued for more hiring in the Public Works Department jobs. I think the most notable example of what you saw was the recent snowfall, where we had 31 snow plows for a city that used to have 51 a few years ago. But that leads over into things like street cleaning. We don't have enough people in those departments. We need to find the sources of revenue, find the money to provide the services that you, the taxpayers, deserve.
A clean city is key to economic development and job creation, besides instilling pride in Joliet. Especially our entryways into the city need to be completely clean and free of debris. Of course, we have the option of utilizing city crews. I also would like to negotiate an agreement with the court system to allow individuals that receive community-based service hours requirement to at least clean our entryways so that we look presentable to visitors and everyone else.
Before I get to the next question, just want to remind you guys, just keep the mic a little bit further away from you. We have a little bit of crackle with that. All right, the next question for Andy. If elected, would you put all the money that will possibly be brought in from medical marijuana in a special account so that the public can see where this money is spent?
Well, I don't believe that the money from the medical marijuana will go to the city. It'll go to the owners of the medical marijuana facility. So those monies would be independent of the city.
Yeah, in Joliet, we have an 8.75% sales tax. There's a 1% sales tax on food or medicine. I'm not sure what category medical marijuana will fall under, and I'm also not sure. My guess would be the state of Illinois is going to want to keep as much of those dollars as it can. I don't see any reason to put it in a separate fund. I think it should be treated like any other sales tax in the city.
Okay, Bob, what are your ideas for attracting new businesses to Joliet?
It's going to be difficult to answer in a minute, but I think what you see currently in Joliet, what passes for economic development, is to sit back and wait for someone to come down to the intermodal and say, I brought in jobs, or to point to the mall and wait for the newest store or restaurant to come in and say, I brought in jobs. That doesn't cut it in Joliet. The intermodal is a great economic engine. Joliet needs to be aggressive and go out and bring quality jobs and quality business in. We look to the north at Bolingbrook and Romeoville, see how those communities have remade themselves in the last 20 years. They don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the location, they don't have the workforce that Joliet does. If Bolingbrook could do it, or Romeoville could do it, it certainly can be done in Joliet, but it's only going to be done when the city aggressively markets itself, and that starts with the mayor's office, has to aggressively sell Joliet to outsiders to come here and do business.
I would like to start by identifying a project like the Town Street Center that was proposed in 2007 for I-55 and I-80, for the Legoland amusement park that was proposed for that site. That's one of our key spots that needs to be developed. If we can get that spot going, that would be a key to showing that we can move forward. We have a number of industrial parks within the area. We need to identify which type of industries we're going at each industrial park. We also have to look at business retention, and the mayor needs to get out and visit every major employer to ensure that they're not going to be leaving the city.
Okay, next question for Andy. What about putting cameras on light poles in troublesome areas to help cease the ongoing violence?
Oh, I definitely would approve of that as long as the homeowner association and the neighbors that would be directly affected by cameras accept that. We don't want no invasion of privacy, so we need to ensure that that is protected. We also need to look at utilizing LED lighting in high crime areas so that we can reduce crime within those areas through lights as well as cameras.
So the cameras are already in place in some neighborhoods in Joliet. There's a question about the first project. They've been up at Fairmont Juniper for years. There's been crime cameras. I think they work, and I think it's a great idea. I think it comes down to resources. Is it more important to have a camera or to hire extra police? But if the money was available, and as Mr. Mahat stated, if there was an objection from the neighborhood, we can identify high crime areas, anything we can do to help solve the crime problem, I would support.
Okay, next question. Bob, what is your idea of a world-class city?
I think a world-class city is one where the residents have an unemployment rate much lower than Joliet, which is higher than the state of Illinois. Joliet's a great city. There are many great things about this city. Unfortunately, there are too many areas in the city filled with blight, and there are too many of our residents that don't have sustainable living wage jobs. We talked about Centerpoint a little bit earlier. I don't understand why our city puts such a premium, not just such a premium, we only put a premium on whenever new business comes to Joliet that'll be built by union labor. Once the buildings are built, the city walks away from any commitment to our residents who have to work in those buildings. If we're going to require these businesses to have union labor to build them, we should require union jobs inside so people aren't being paid temporary job wages, aren't being laid off after 2 months so they don't have to pay benefits, the company doesn't pay benefits, so people are given jobs where they can build, buy a house, and raise a family and sustain themselves.
Developing a world-class city is my vision for the city of Joliet. That means that Joliet has all of the amenities, from good-paying jobs, safe neighborhoods, a good-looking city, great schools, entertainment choices, recreational choices, great restaurants, shopping choices, as well as art, entertainment. Those are the amenities that make up a great city. I think the people of Joliet deserve those, and I'll work at getting them for them. Thank you.
Next question for Andy. If elected mayor, what is your long-term vision for downtown Joliet? We all know that it becomes a ghost town down there after the law offices close. How do you plan on turning it around?
Well, first of all, the city is making a mistake in how it spends its monies downtown. For years, it's spent millions of dollars trying to attract businesses downtown. Those same dollars should be put into residential living. We need to focus on getting people to live downtown, paying our business owners an incentive to create residential housing, as well as giving an incentive to people that are renting or buying homes in Joliet. So the first focus should be on the residential living. I do not favor the reopening of Chicago Street. That restricts residential living. It is outside of the objective of the new train bus station, that is to foster residential living along train and bus lines and create public access. We need to bring new parking decks downtown. We need to eliminate, or at least have 2 hours of free parking in downtown meters, so that we can focus on specialty shopping, entertainment venues downtown. I have a whole series of ideas on the downtown redevelopment.
I agree with Mr. House about encouraging residential use downtown. I think with the college campuses that are coming down there, that's something that's a realistic possibility. I disagree with about Chicago Street. I think opening that up is key to making downtown more accessible, creating the gridlock and the confusion for trying to drive and get through downtown. There is a new parking deck which is going to be built across from the ballpark on Jefferson Street. I think the key to downtown, though, and something, again, much like Evergreen Terrace, that the city currently has not addressed, is keeping the courthouse downtown. We don't know as a city what we are going to have to ante up to the county, but I can promise you they're going to come to us. They are considering a green site for the downtown courthouse and moving out of Joliet. We need to step up and find the funds to keep the courthouse downtown. I think everything centers ultimately around that.
Okay, the next question for Bob. How will you work with the neighborhood associations?
I think I work the same way I have. Obviously, in District 2, there's a number of neighborhood groups that I work with. I attend their meetings on a monthly basis, and I'm in contact with their members and their presidents. I also made it a point as a city councilman to extend my presence at groups outside of the area, like the Cunningham group, which of course is where I met the infamous John Sheridan. But St. Pat's, those groups that aren't in District 2 but border District 2, I always made it a habit to attend and stay in contact with. I think most of the council are very good about that. I think our at-large council people do a good job citywide. As mayor, I will continue to have those relationships and attend those meetings on a regular basis.
Neighborhood councils and community organizations provide a great point for communication between the city and the residents of the city. So that communication needs to maintain, strengthen, and improve. I favor all types of activities going through that, from any type of development coming into that, liquor licenses going into communities. We need to get the input of the community. I talked before about the cameras. The neighborhood associations are the perfect groups to get that information, and that's who we need to approach as the residents and citizens of the city.
Okay, next question for Andy. Development seems to spread to the west. What ideas do you have to help revitalize the east side of Joliet? I know it's more convenient for me to currently spend money at the Linux locations as far as gas, groceries, etc., than to drive to the west side.
Well, I'm first proposing a task force on Silver Cross Hospital, at the old Silver Cross Hospital, its redevelopment. We need to look at what we're going to do with the prison on Collins Street. One of the issues I think on the east side is a new grocery store, so I'll ask, that's the first thing that they want is a grocery store. I did my research, looked at targeting Whole Foods. That might not appear to be the first number one choice, but Whole Foods' mission is healthy eating. If we approach, if I was to call Whole Foods and ask, they would say, what are you doing? I would say, I made food an issue in the campaign. I developed a Mayor's Advisory Committee on Food. I created a tax increment financing district. I support healthy eating. I got the community college to teach that. Now I need a partner that shares that vision of healthy eating, and I believe that could bring us and get a grocery store on the east side. And I think we need to look at what the needs of the residents are and direct our efforts to get what they want.
I think Joliet, and I think everyone here knows, has had enough task force. I think we need to quit talking and get action. The federal government hands out over $600 billion in grant every year. To my knowledge, the city of Joliet has never employed a lobbyist to go to Springfield or go to Washington, D.C. and get some of that grant money back in Joliet. When you're looking at areas like U.S. Steel, there are grants for brownfield sites just like that that have been contaminated over the years for cleanup. But I think the reality is, if you're waiting for private development to come into underdeveloped neighborhoods, it's not going to happen. We need to find grant money and give government incentives to bring businesses into these communities.
Okay, the next question for Bob. How are you going to ensure minority participation when it comes to future construction contracts?
Well, again, I think what we spoke about earlier, I think that needs to be a priority. And clearly the mayor's office has influence, and there's things that are influential when we talk about dealing with the central building trades. That's just an area that either has been overlooked or ignored. It can't be. Joliet is 44% minority. Almost half of this city is minority. And the old saying that a rising tide lifts all boats. Joliet is not in good financial shape if one part of town is thriving and the other isn't. The pie is big enough, it needs to be cut and distributed equally amongst all people, and I think the mayor's office has the authority in Joliet to lean on businesses and lean on the trades to get that done.
First of all, we have to look in our own house. We need to have our police and firefighter workforce reflective of our population. That is definitely not happening today. I was also asked whether or not I would support an increase in increasing the percent of contracts from 10 to 20% for minority businesses. My first choice is to increase minority participation in those contracts. We need to encourage our labor unions and our construction trade unions to have more minorities as their union members. This way we increase participation and can work at sharing the wealth throughout the city. Thank you.
Okay, the next question for Andy. There seems to be a police voluntary program in other counties. What would that opportunity become available to start here in Joliet?
I would definitely favor an auxiliary workforce that would be armed within the City Department of Joliet. And if we have to negotiate that through the labor contract, I would so do that. There's plenty of advantages to having an auxiliary workforce within the city police department. And I think we can capitalize and utilize that in creating the image that we want to project to people, to be recognized as a city that helps to lower costs to community-based organizations that need the police enforced at their events. So I do support an auxiliary effort within the police department.
There already is an auxiliary unit within the police department. However, they aren't armed. They're called out for special events. They do things like directing traffic. You'll see them at Bicentennial Park or out by the track. There's also Citizens Police Academy. There's Citizens Ride-Alongs. I think Chief Trafton is one of the chiefs who really did all he could to open up the police department. But I have to say, with all due respect to Mr. Mahalitz, the idea of arming part-time auxiliary police and putting them on these streets is a recipe for disaster. This is the last week and a half, there have been 2 police shootings. Luckily, they were done professionally, and they're handled rightly. The last thing Joliet needs to see is what's happened in Ferguson, Missouri. Under no circumstances should we go to part-time armed police officers.
Okay, next question for Bob. The Midlothian Police Department recently had to pay a ransom to get files back that were held hostage electronically. What will you do to ensure that the city of Joliet has electronic security files, including email, while still providing transparency and public access?
We are in the process of saving all city emails. That was never done before. So I think some of us on the council have requested emails that either get deleted or disappear before they come to us. That's in the process of being changed. I'm not familiar with what happened in Midlothian. I can tell you that this new council is taking the steps to ensure that all city records are being archived the right way and that there will be transparency. There aren't going to be any hidden agendas or emails disappearing from the system when they're requested by the council or by the public.
I know that the city has made dramatic improvements in its IT efforts and is securing the needed hardware and software to do this. So I think that those efforts should be continued. The more transparency, access, review of information between staff, city council member is all to the benefit of Joliet residents.
Okay, next question for Andy. The prison on College Street has fallen into disrepair. How are you going to address the eyesore that it has become?
Bob mentioned earlier that he favors lobbyists. Our lobbyist for the college was able to get us dinner with the governor Tuesday night. I sat across the governor, Senator McGuire sat next to the governor and was addressing the issues of the Collins Street prison between the three of us. So we need to have a vision for that. The governor seems receptive to talking about and giving the city whatever it would need in terms of acquisition. So we need to discuss cost and a plan for the Collins Street prison.
I agree with Mr. Mahalich. Again, I think that is an area where a lobbyist would be crucial. It's clear that the city of Joliet doesn't have the funds to clean up the prison site and redevelop it. However, it would be great, and I know there's government money available, not just for the prison, but for the U.S. Steel site, to clean those areas up and offer economic incentives to developers or private business to come in. Again, they've been sitting vacant for years. It's not going to happen on its own. It's only going to happen when the city and the mayor's office pushes the effort to get it done.
Okay, the next question for Bob. The city's public high schools are overcrowded. West and Central both have over 3,000 students each. If there were possibilities to expand each school, or build a third school, or get in talks with the Job Corps and reopen Joliet East, which option would you deem best and why?
Well, there is a third high school, Plainfield South, which services a lot of the western part of Joliet. Ultimately, I don't think that question applies to city government. The school boards control that. They have their own elected officials and their own budget. I think the city, of course, should partner with the school boards to do what they believe is best. But currently, there are 3 high schools in Joliet.
Well, actually, there's 4 high schools in Joliet. The city needs to step out of its comfort zone with a number of individuals. Number one is the school system. We need to ensure that we have some of the best schools within the area so that our graduates from high school can go on to community-based, to community college or apprenticeship programs, vocational training in other areas. But to develop that relationship means that we can have input if they have an issue, in this case overcrowding. We can sit down with them on a much easier basis and develop a strategy jointly that would help them achieve getting an additional school or an expansion of the school.
Each candidate is allowed to ask questions of the other, and the other has a minute to respond. So it's one question you can ask each one.
All right, my question to Bob was, and we already got his answer, but we'll follow up with it. Do you favor the reopening of Chicago Street as part of the downtown redevelopment plan? And is the possible reopening of Chicago Street a reason why the County of Will has not announced plans to build a new courthouse in downtown Joliet?
The answer is yes, I do favor it. I own a business on Chicago Street. It's difficult to get out-of-towners around and to direct them to mine and other businesses. It would be much more convenient, not just for me, but for all the merchants downtown if it was open. Regarding the downtown courthouse, no, that's not a reason why. There's a lot of politics going on the county board, and quite frankly, the city of Joliet, to this point, has dropped the ball. We have not been active enough in courting and securing the downtown courthouse. The issue with the Chicago Street area right now has to do with the fact that the current location where Chicago Street would open up is a parking lot. There was a fight amongst Will County between the county board and the judges as to who owned the parking lot. They were referencing an agreement made back in the 1950s. The judges have been keeping the parking money, the county board, or the judges don't want to give that up or want to be compensated some other way if they give up that source of revenue.
All right, we'll have a 10-minute